On the day of the garage sale, I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. It was just a way to get rid of some of my son's old toys that he no longer used. Among them was a teddy bear that, despite being a little worn, still held some sentimental value for me. But then, a strange man appeared. He seemed interested only in the teddy bear and started asking questions about it. At first, I didn't think much of it, but when he refused to pay the price I was asking and kept insisting, something felt off. He claimed to be a collector and said the teddy bear was rare, but it seemed more like an excuse to pressure me into lowering the price. In the end, I sold it to someone else, and the money helped with some bills. But what happened afterward, I never could have imagined. In the following days, the man started appearing on my street. I saw him once, standing in front of my house, just watching. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, maybe he lived nearby, but then I started noticing that he was there frequently, peering through my window. I felt uneasy, but didn't know what to do. Until one night, he left a note in my mailbox. The note simply said, "I need the teddy bear." A wave of discomfort washed over me, but I still thought it was just a desperate request, maybe an overreaction. The real problem was the next day, when I checked my mailbox again, and found the teddy bear inside a plastic bag. I had sold it to someone else, so how was it back here? That was enough to send me into a spiral of paranoia. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the teddy bear in my hands, unable to process what was happening. The first thought that came to mind was the man from the garage sale. It couldn't be a coincidence. I immediately called the person who had bought it, but they assured me they hadn't returned it. The worst part was that, later that night, after finding the teddy bear, things started to get even stranger. It was around midnight, and I was home alone with my son when the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, so I hesitated for a moment before answering. What I heard on the other end of the line froze me in place. Just the melody of a children's song, playing on a loop, like a lullaby. I couldn't understand. I was in shock, unsure of what to do. When I tried to speak, the line went dead. I called back, but the number was unreachable. A cold chill ran down my spine. At that moment, paranoia completely took over, and I couldn't stop glancing out the windows. In the following days, the man's behavior became even more disturbing. I started noticing that he was constantly watching me. If I went out to buy something, he was there in the street, always at a distance, just observing. My son also began feeling uneasy, sensing that something wasn't right. I tried going to the police, but how could I prove something so bizarre? Without evidence, they couldn't do anything. I couldn't ignore the feeling of being watched anymore. At night, I locked all the doors and windows, but I knew he was out there, waiting, watching. The worst part was looking outside and seeing him standing on the sidewalk, near the corner, just staring at me from afar. I tried to ignore it, tried to move on with my life, but his presence felt inescapable. The next morning, when I woke up, I noticed that one of the windows was open. I knew I hadn't left it that way. The curtains swayed slightly in the wind, and a deep sense of unease settled over me. I rushed to my son's room and found him awake, staring into the corner of the room. His eyes were wide, and he whispered softly, "He's outside, Mommy." I knew exactly who he was talking about. My heart pounded as I moved to the window, and there he was once again, standing across the street. But this time, he wasn't just watching. He was holding something, a teddy bear. But it wasn't the same one I had tried to sell that day. This one was different. This guy was insane. A surge of adrenaline rushed through me. The man didn't seem violent, but his persistence and the way he was getting closer filled me with fear. What did he want? Why was he so obsessed with a simple teddy bear? Then, things escalated even further. That afternoon, after putting my son to sleep, I received another phone call. The number was unknown again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I answered immediately. The children's song played again. But this time, something was different. At the end of the melody, a voice whispered softly, barely audible. "I want him." I almost collapsed to the floor. Panic took over me. He was getting closer, but I didn't know how far he would go. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer, but I also didn't know what to do. The man had gone from being just a strange collector to a terrifying, looming presence. And I was alone with my son, with no idea how to escape from it all. I couldn't take it anymore. The fear and the constant feeling of being watched were consuming me. Every step I took, it felt like he was there lurking. I could no longer tell what was real and what was just my paranoia. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I needed him to stop. I needed this torment to end. That's when I decided to act. I knew he would show up. It was only a matter of time. So that afternoon, when he appeared once again, standing at the corner, staring at me, I made a decision. I walked to the front door, looked out the window, and with my voice trembling, I shouted at him. "Is this teddy bear what you want so badly? Then I'll give it to you. I don't want this thing anymore. I don't want the stalking anymore. You've scared me enough, and all I ask is that you stop. Leave us alone." I went to the mailbox, holding the teddy bear in my hands, and placed it there in plain sight. Then I waited. My breathing was heavy, my chest tight with tension. I looked out the window, and he was still there, in the same spot, watching me. He didn't move, he just stared, as if he was waiting for something. I knew what I was doing was risky. I was practically giving the toy back, without knowing how he would react. But the feeling of helplessness was crushing me. I just wanted him to stop following me. I just wanted this to end. Slowly, he stepped forward, walking with deliberate, unhurried steps. When he reached the mailbox, he picked up the teddy bear, and for the first time, I saw a look of satisfaction on his face. He glanced at me without saying a word, and made a small gesture of acknowledgement, as if silently saying, "Thank you." Without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the street. I stood there, frozen, unsure if I could finally relax. But for a brief moment, I felt a faint sense of relief. I knew this didn't mean he had given up completely, but something told me that, for now, he was satisfied. And if I was lucky, maybe he would never come back. I stepped inside, locking the door behind me. I spent the rest of the night in silence, trying to breathe normally again. But even though I had gotten rid of the teddy bear, something told me that the fear would never truly disappear. The man had gotten what he wanted. In my neighborhood, we hold a large community garage sale every year. It's a tradition that has been going on for years, and almost everyone participates. This year was no different. From early morning, the sidewalks were lined with tables, clothes hanging, and all sorts of things people wanted to get rid of. That's how I met a woman I had never seen before. She sat in a folding chair at the end of the street, a delicate embroidered cloth covering a small table, with various antique porcelain pieces spread out. She looked fragile, maybe in her 80s, and said she had lived on the street for decades but now wanted to part with some family heirlooms. I found it curious because I had never seen her before, but I didn't think much of it. By the end of the day, the sale was a success. Everyone packed up their stalls and went home. But in the following days, something strange started happening. People began to notice small objects disappearing from their homes. Nothing major, just little things like a keychain, a special spoon, a small jewelry box. At first, we thought it was just coincidence. Maybe someone misplaced their belongings or stored them somewhere different. But what truly unsettled everyone was what happened next. Some of these people found, in the very spots where their objects had gone missing, small porcelain items, exactly like the ones the old woman had been selling. Carla, one of my neighbors, was the first to mention something truly strange. She had lost a small handheld mirror that had belonged to her grandmother and was devastated when she couldn't find it anywhere. But 2 days later, when she opened her nightstand drawer, she found a porcelain teacup in the exact spot where her mirror used to be. It was delicate, with golden details, very similar to the ones the old woman had been selling. At first, she thought someone in her family had put it there without telling her, but when she asked her husband and daughter, neither of them knew anything about it. And then, as days passed, more people started reporting the same thing. The most unsettling event happened to Mr. Antonio's family. He's a retired man who has lived here for decades. Everyone knows him. One day, while handling one of the mysterious porcelain pieces that had appeared in his home, he heard something rattle inside. It was a small porcelain vase, and when he turned it upside down, an envelope fell to the floor. Inside were several old photographs. But what sent chills down everyone's spine was the fact that they were pictures of his own family, taken years ago, inside his house. Some showed his children playing in the living room when they were still young. Others showed Mr. Antonio and his wife sitting on the couch, watching TV. But the most disturbing part? None of these photos had been taken by them. Mr. Antonio brought the photos to the neighborhood meeting we held that week. He was visibly shaken, and for good reason. We were all in shock seeing those images. The question that none of us could stop asking was, how did that old woman get these photos? And why? Some people tried to come up with logical explanations. Maybe she had known the previous owners of the houses, or had worked as a housekeeper here in the past. But none of those theories made sense because the photos were too recent to belong to some distant past. By this point, we were convinced that the woman wasn't just an ordinary seller. but no one knew where she had come from, and worse, no one knew where she had gone. After the garage sale, she vanished. Even the oldest residents had no memory of her from previous events, or any connection to the neighborhood. A few of us decided to ask around at local shops, and even check security cameras from nearby houses, but it was as if she had simply appeared on the day of the sale and disappeared afterward. We started to suspect that she had entered our homes without us noticing. But how? No one reported signs of forced entry or broken windows. That only made things more unsettling. The only explanation was that she had somehow gained access in a subtle way, maybe through unlocked doors, open windows, or even slipping in while someone was distracted. The strangest part was the way she swapped objects. It didn't feel like she was just stealing. It felt like she was replacing our belongings with those porcelain pieces, as if leaving a mark, a reminder of her presence. Fear spread through the neighborhood. People started checking their homes for other signs of intrusion. That's when Mrs. Marta, who lived alone, found something even more disturbing. At the back of a drawer she rarely used, she discovered a porcelain teacup identical to the ones the woman had been selling. But inside it, there was a lock of hair tied with a red ribbon. The hair wasn't hers. That was enough for many to start reinforcing their home security, and some even considered calling the police. But how could we report something like this without concrete evidence? A few neighbors tried to track down the woman, but no one knew where she lived. No one remembered ever seeing her in the neighborhood before, and no one knew her name. It was as if she had appeared just for the garage sale and then vanished. We asked the event organizer if he had any information about her, maybe a phone number, an address, anything. But he said the woman had shown up on the day of the event unannounced, set up her table, and stayed there the whole time, blending in like any other neighbor. By now, everyone was on edge. Some people started changing their locks, installing cameras, and adding extra security measures. Others decided to get rid of the porcelain objects, throwing them away or even burning them. But the strangest thing happened to the family who had found the photos inside one of the pieces. The next night, someone knocked on their door in the middle of the night. It wasn't a loud knock, just a soft, persistent tapping. When the father of the family peeked through the curtain to see who it was, there was no one there. Only a small porcelain teacup left on the doormat. After that, no one wanted to keep any trace of that woman around. Families who had bought her pieces began getting rid of them however they could. Some throwing them in the trash, others smashing them, even burning them. But the real fear wasn't about the porcelain itself, it was about what it meant. How had she entered our homes unnoticed? How long had she been watching the residents? The atmosphere in the neighborhood grew tense. Some people started complaining about hearing footsteps outside at night, while others swore they saw a figure in the distance, standing at the corner watching. But just as suddenly as it had begun, the sense of being watched started to fade. The remaining porcelain pieces were discarded, and with time, the story became just another strange tale to tell. But to this day, no one knows who that woman was, or how she had managed to obtain such personal belongings from the residents without ever being seen. What frightens us even more is the possibility that she is still out there, maybe watching another neighborhood now. I've been working as a salesperson at a furniture store for a few years now, and I've dealt with all kinds of customers. But nothing prepared me for what I experienced with one particular woman. At first, she seemed like just another regular customer, one of those who enjoy visiting the store frequently, browsing the products, and chatting. But she always insisted on being assisted by me. Initially, I thought it was just a personal preference, which is common in retail. But then she started asking strange questions, ones that had nothing to do with furniture. She wanted to know if I lived alone, what my days off were, if I usually went out at night. Always staring a little too intensely, as if she were trying to memorize every answer. She started showing up every day. She never bought anything, just walked around the store, watching me while I assisted other customers. If I recommended a sofa, she would say she loved that model. If I showed a dining table, she would say it would look perfect in her home. But she never took anything. Then one day she showed up with a gift. A small box wrapped with a red ribbon. I felt awkward and tried to refuse, but she insisted so much that I accepted it out of politeness. When I opened it at home, it was a picture frame with a photo of me. Not a social media picture, but an image of me inside the store, as if it had been taken without me noticing. The next day, when I arrived at work, she was there again. And this time, it wasn't just a casual visit like before. She said she wanted to discuss a piece of furniture she had bought weeks ago, but the conversation never revolved around that. In fact, she didn't seem interested in furniture at all. What bothered me the most was how she invaded my personal space, always pushing for contact, asking about my life. She started making more suggestive comments, asking if I had a girlfriend, if I often went out to bars. I remained polite, but over time, I started avoiding eye contact with her. I didn't know what to do. I just knew my discomfort was growing. Then one night, after closing the store and heading home, I found her in my car. I saw her in the rearview mirror, hiding in the back seat, as if she had been waiting for me to get in. My heart pounded, and on instinct, I locked the doors. She walked up to the window and started talking calmly, as if she were in her own home, saying she just wanted to chat, like it was no big deal. I shook my head, signaling that I needed to leave. She stepped back, and I drove away immediately. That was the moment I realized things were truly out of control. She had been tracking my schedule, my movements, everything, without me even noticing. The worst part came the next morning. I woke up to find a note on my car's windshield. It wasn't a love letter or a direct threat, but just the fact that she had left it there, in broad daylight, sent me into a panic. The note said she cared a lot about me, and wanted to get to know me better. It felt so unsettling, like I was being stalked, not in an obvious way, but like a shadow, always nearby but never fully revealing itself. The feeling of being watched became unbearable. She was acting as if there was nothing wrong with invading my privacy, as if she were just naturally part of my daily life. Things escalated even further when, one night after a long workday, she called me. I was so exhausted that I answered without thinking. When I heard her voice, it was like time froze. She spoke softly, saying she was standing outside my house and wanted to give me a present. She didn't ask for anything in return, but the tone of her voice wasn't that of someone doing a kind gesture. It was as if she were manipulating the situation. I told her to leave and never contact me again, but the call ended before she could respond. The thought of someone standing at my door, even if I didn't see anyone physically there, made me feel completely vulnerable and out of control. The next day, while at work, something happened that completely unsettled me. I went to my car to grab a folder and found the driver's side door slightly open. I was sure I had closed it when I parked. Looking inside, I noticed something was different. A small object sat on the seat, a keychain I had never seen before. It made no sense. My eyes locked onto it for what felt like an eternity. A small metal keychain, shaped like a chair, something that, somehow, could only have been left there by her. That was when my paranoia became real. She was inserting herself into my life in a way that was both subtle and terrifying, almost invisible, yet undeniably there, surrounding me in a way I had no idea how to stop. I left work early that day, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. On my way home, I noticed she was following me. Not in an obvious way, but in a way I could only detect through the reflections of other cars, or the quick glances she threw my way, while driving a few meters behind me. At every turn, it seemed like she was getting closer. This wasn't normal. I had already decided I needed to go to the police, but I was afraid they wouldn't take me seriously. A deep sense of helplessness took over me. No matter how much I wanted to end this, it felt like she was always one step ahead, watching, waiting for the right moment to close in. That night, when I finally got home, my anxiety was through the roof. I locked every window and door with excessive caution, as if that would make a difference. The thought of her possibly being outside, watching everything, wouldn't leave me. I barely slept. When the sun finally started rising, I tried to convince myself that everything was just a series of coincidences, but deep down, I knew something was seriously wrong. The next morning, the shock I felt was indescribable. I was having coffee when I noticed something on my car, parked outside my house. A bag. My heart pounded as I approached. Inside, there was a gift, a small potted plant, along with a handwritten note. It wasn't a threatening message, but it was definitely unsettling. "I hope you like this one," the note read. The kind of gesture that might seem thoughtful, but under the circumstances, felt more like a warning, a marking of territory. I knew she was behind it, but the worst part was realizing the gift was accompanied by a photo of me, taken in my own yard, at the exact moment I arrived home the night before. I never figured out how she did it, but the certainty that I was being watched, on an almost nightmarish level, hit me like a freight train. That's when I finally gathered the courage to go to the police station. I reported everything, showing them the gifts, the messages, and her behavior. The officer looked at me with a mix of sympathy and skepticism, but filed the report. However, as I walked out of the station, I noticed something that almost made me lose control. She was standing across the street, wearing that eerie smile, as if she knew exactly what I had just done. When our eyes met, the terror was unbearable. She didn't say a word, but the way she looked at me made it clear. She was the one in control of the whole situation. The truth is, even with the report filed, nothing changed. I took every possible precaution, but she kept appearing in my life, so silently that it felt like she had become part of my daily routine. She never directly threatened me, but her constant presence, like a shadow following me, was more terrifying than any explicit threat could ever be. And in the end, there was no clear resolution. She simply vanished. No more messages, no more gifts. But I know she's still out there, and to this day, the feeling of being watched has never left me.